Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer video, and today we're going to be talking about 10 decks that are almost great in Pioneer. So these are 10 decks that obviously, it's my opinion, decks that are really close. Whether or not they're maybe one hypothetical new card away, or maybe even just a good reprint away from rising to the top of the metagame. All these decks are a little bit different. There's not, I'm not going to be talking about like 3 different versions of Burn or anything like that. It's just going to be decks that I think are absolutely super duper close to being fantastic in the format. But before we hop into those decks here, I gotta mention, we are on our road to 1K subs. We're currently at 910 as of the recording of this video, and we're gonna be doing a huge giveaway once we hit 1,000. And if you want to be part of the giveaways, as well as also know when that video is coming out, you're definitely gonna want to be subscribed to the channel, so that way you get notified as soon as we hit 1,000 subs. Okay, let's go and hop to the actual list here. So number 10, I have Dimir Mill. On paper, it's kind of weird how Dimir Mill really isn't that good, We have a card like Ruin Crab. We have like Breaking and Entering that mills like, I want to say it's 8 cards. We obviously have enough cards like Demolition Field, and we have Field of Ruin to obviously work with Ruin Crab. There's a lot of good mill cards in the format, but what do I think this deck needs? So I'll be honest with you, I think this deck needs another crab. I think Hedron Crab and Ruin Crab would be fantastic both in Pioneer in terms of making mill relevant. Just having the one crab can, be a little awkward. You got to play a card like Merfolk Secret Keeper, which really isn't that good. And speaking of Merfolk Secret Keeper, just better mill sorceries in general. Some of them are good, like Breaking and Entering is pretty solid in its own right, but then from there, a lot of the mill spells are just kind of underwhelming. I think there's honestly a lot of good reprints. Again, I kind of already mentioned Hedron Crab, but I think Glimpse the Unthinkable would be huge for that. Obviously, 2 mana, mill 10. I even think a card like Archive Trap would also be good. And Archive Trap is actually already programmed on Arena because of the breaking news prosperity thing from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So overall, I think mill is really close. I think it's 1, maybe 2 reprints away from being good. You don't really see it pop up in the metagame as a whole. And I think it makes sense why, but I think this deck is really close. So that's why I have it at number 10. All right, number 9, I have a deck that once was kind of one of the best decks in the format, but people kind of solved it a little bit, is Boros Convoke. I think the deck is still pretty solid overall. Obviously, you use Knight Heir of Eos and a card like Venerated Loxodon. You use cards like Gleeful Demolition, make a whole bunch of 1/1s, tap them, play a Knight Heir of Eos or a Venerated Loxodon, and just get a whole bunch of creatures out and just overwhelm the opponent. What I think the deck needs is it needs more cheaper token generators, like, like 1 card to make 2-3 tokens, and it needs a better Convoke creature. I do like Venerated Loxodon. I think the card is okay. Knight Heir of Eos obviously is fantastic because you grab your Imadane's Recruiter, but I really think the deck just needs a better Convoking. Like, putting the counters on the creatures that you already tap is usually not like super duper good, so I think that's what the deck kind of needs. But a good reprint overall it's pretty simple. Kodotha Rebirth. I think having 8 of the effects where it's 1 red to make 3 dudes is all the deck really needs to become absolutely fantastic, just because there's those games where you don't get the Gleeful Demolition and then they just kind of play like a turn 2 the Recruiter, or not the Recruiter, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's like the 1/1 for 2 that makes a 1/1. It's just not that fantastic, and I don't know, overall I think that's what the deck needs to get better in the Pioneer format. So number 8, I have Golgari Roots, a deck that, like a couple months ago, it was like the flavor of the month popular card, and it kind of fell off. I think this deck is really cool. I've seen a lot of different versions of Insidious Roots, but what I think the deck needs to be better is it needs another recursive creature, which we're going to talk about one in just a second here. But I also think the deck just kind of needs another Insidious Roots. I think that's really what the deck needs to be good. Whether or not it's on a creature or maybe even just another enchantment that's a little bit different but kind of the same thing. I think that's what the deck needs to really be able to pop off. And I think a card like Gravecrawler would be fantastic for not only like, Insidious Roots, but a whole bunch of different decks. I know that some of the recursive creatures that this deck can play are zombies, so it wouldn't be that hard for the deck to just maybe go into like a zombie Insidious Roots style of deck. I don't know. I think Gravecrawler would be fantastic. It's a cheap recursive creature that I think would fit this deck really well, and that's why I've got Golgari Roots at number 8 on the list. All right, number 7. I have an Aristocrats / Golgari Jund Rakdos Sacrifice deck. there's a few things that I think this deck needs to obviously pop off. Obviously, when we got, I'm forgetting the cat, Yigra, obviously, Junsack got really, really popular again, but it didn't really perform all that well. What do I think the deck needs? I think it needs a free sack outlet, which we're going to talk about one in just a second. It needs a free sack outlet that's cheap. 3-4 mana sack outlets just really don't work that well. There's 1-2 mana free sack outlet, but it's not even in the really right colors, at least for Sacrifice. It is in the right color for Aristocrats, but it is legendary, so it can be a little awkward. And then it needs a better drain creature. Like, obviously, Zulaport Cutthroat is pretty good, and then you also have the white-black one, not Cartel Aristocrat, forgetting the name of it all of a sudden, but it honestly just needs a card like Blood Artist, where it's like when any creature dies, not even just yours. I know we did get the new one that's in Vengeful Bloodlord, or Vengeful Blood Witch. That one's okay, but I think it really just needs a better one. But the reprint that I think both of these decks need is Viscera Seer. Viscera Seer is fantastic. It was one of the main combo pieces in the Abzan Company deck a couple years ago in Modern, just because having the free sack outlet was for 1 mana is super duper strong. And that's probably the reason why it hasn't really came back for the most part. So Viscera Seer is the reprint that I've chosen for this deck, and again, I think Aristocrats or even the Sacrifice decks are really, really close from being tier 1, and that's why I've got it number 7 on the list here. All right, number 6, I have Goblins. And not even just like, oh, what style of Goblins? Is it mono red? Is it Boros? You got Gruul, Rakdos, just Goblins in general. What do I think this deck needs? I think it needs an aggressive 1-drop. Like obviously we have cards like, was it Legion Loyalist? But I've never really thought the card was all that strong in the first place in terms of for Goblins. And then it needs another 2-mana Lord. Runbat Hordemaster is absolutely fantastic. I think Goblins just needs another 2-mana Lord. All these other creature types keep getting all these really, really pushed 2-mana Lords. And then there's Goblins, where they just have Runvet Hordemaster and nothing else. I don't even know if we've really gotten a Goblin Lord since Runvet Hordemaster for the most part. I don't know if we have. Like, obviously, Foundations had that weird 3-mana red one that gives it flying or something, but that's really not enough. It's just, we need another 2-mana Lord. But a good reprint that I think would also be a huge boost for this deck is Goblin Grenade. Would Goblin Grenade be a little too good? Yeah, like 1 red sack a Goblin deal 5 is just kind of insane in general. I think it would be too good, but regardless of the version of Goblins you play, you would still want Goblin Grenade, and that's why I chose that as my good reprint for the deck. So number 6, I have Goblins. All right, we're hitting top 5 territory here. So number 5, and this is a incredibly biased pick, but I haven't really talked about this before on the channel, and that's why I'm choosing. Number 5, I've got Gruul Dinosaurs. I think Gruul Dinosaurs is a solid deck in its own right. If you're looking to play like a, not like hyper aggro, but not a ramp deck, if you're looking to just play like a nice, well-costed monster deck, I think Dinosaurs is the best option you can play in the format. But what does this deck need? Okay, so this deck needs a 1-mana Dino. You really just play the Elves and Commune with Dinosaurs. Are the cards good? Yes, but it's mostly because there isn't a 1-drop dinosaur to actually play. There's nothing. There is absolutely nothing. The deck also needs another 3-mana dinosaur. So you do have a card like Pugnacious Hammerskull. Pugnacious Hammerskull is pretty good. I'm not counting Tranquil Throwback because A, it's not aggressive, and B, although it is 3 mana, it's not really 3 mana. You have to pay more mana into it to get bonus mode. So I don't count that as a 3-drop. And then the deck also needs a 4 CMC 5-power dino. So it needs like a 5/4 with trample that has some random abilities stapled onto it. That's what Dinosaurs honestly needs. A card like Ripjaw Raptor, although works really, really well with Marauding Raptor, is just kind of starting to fall flat. I mean, a 4/5 for 4, other than like Shieldred, is not what it once was. And that's kind of the problem too, is Dinosaurs has a really hard time with all these big mid-range threats that keeps coming out, like Shieldred, as well as cards like Archfiend of the Dross. And I think what the deck needs is it needs a 4-power or a 5-power 4 CMC Dinosaur to really punch through, but not even just like 4 mana, 5 power. It needs to be aggressive. So a card like Hulking Raptor really isn't what the deck wants. It just needs something that just punches through a lot of damage. But there's a couple different reprints I thought about. I thought about talking about Chameleon Colossus. But I wanted to choose Sawhorn Nemesis. It was a card from Modern Horizons 3 Commander. 4 mana 2/4, but it's not really a 2/4. As it enters, choose a player. If a source would deal damage to the chosen player or a permanent they control, it deals double that damage instead. Is this a type of card that they probably would print into Pioneer? My guess is probably not. They don't do the choose a player stuff in Pioneer. It's always just like your opponent, so it kind of makes sense why they just made it in the Commander set. And it's Modern Horizons, so therefore you can print some kind of stronger cards. But I think this would be a really, really cool card that would help quite a bit. Again, you know, it's like kind of like a 4/4 for 4, but just having all of your dinosaurs, or just a source would deal damage to the chosen player, deals double, so obviously all your dinosaurs would deal double damage. So I don't know, I think it's a little bit of a deep cut, but I think it would be pretty good in the deck. But overall, Gruul Dinosaurs is really, really close to being a fantastic deck in the format, and that's why I have it at number 5. All right, number 4, and honestly, these next few decks are going to be decks that no one's really thinking about for the most part. So number 4, I have Hammer Time. I think Hammer Time is so close to being good in Pioneer. On paper, we have the core. We have Colossus Hammer. We have Sigarda's Aid. We've got creatures that you can toss the equipment on to deal massive damage, but it's just missing some of those modern cards that are just really, really good. Like the better equipped cards, we're missing card like, for instance, we'll talk about in a second, Pure Steel Paladin. We're missing like our, Stoneforge Mystic doesn't obviously equip, but we're missing like the Stoneforge Mystic. We're missing cards like Urza Saga, which kind of goes into the next thing, is 1 CMC equip tutors. Obviously, I'm not saying print Urza Saga into the format. I definitely am not saying that at all. But a card like Steel Shaper's Gift would be fantastic for this deck. There is 2 mana equip tutors, but the difference obviously between 1 and 2 mana is pretty huge overall. But I think Hammer Time is really close to being good in Pioneer. It really just needs a few extra pieces. And one of those pieces, I think, is Pure Steel Paladin. I think this deck lacks a lot of ways to really equip your creatures. Like, you have Sigarda's Aid, and then you have like the one that's 1 white instant equip. A warrior gets +2/+2, and then like, well, if it's a warrior, you can equip something onto it, which just isn't really that reliable. I think the deck needs a card like Pure Steel Paladin to kind of get over the hump a little bit. So I don't know. I think Hammer Time is much closer to being good than people really realize, and that's why I have it at number 4 on the list. All right. Number 3, I have Elementals, and it's at number 3, but this is the deck that, obviously, Elementals have been around since Pioneer started. Like, all these cards like Risen Reef and Cavalier of Thorns and Omnath Locust of the Royal, they've been around since day 1 of Pioneer, and I've never understood why this deck was not good. It has all of the pieces to be good, but what is it actually missing? One of the things I think it's missing is reliable blink spells. We really only have a card like Essence Flux, which really isn't that strong of a card if we're being completely honest. I think it's missing ways to be able to copy all the triggers, and I think it's missing good 3/4 CMC elementals. Because, like, obviously you have Omnath Locust of the Royal, but you don't have any like 3 or 4 CMC elementals that can help you draw some more cards or anything like that and kind of stack with Risen Reef. I think that's really what the deck is missing overall, just because I remember this deck in Standard being so good. You have like obviously Risen Reef, which was the best card pretty much in the entire deck. Then you have your Omnath. You have like the 4 mana 1/1 that like makes 2 more elementals, so you get a bunch of triggers with Risen Reef. I don't know. Obviously those cards still exist in Pioneer, but it's a little different between Standard and Pioneer. I just think the deck needs better elementals as a whole. But one reprint I want to mention is Flamekin Harbinger. I think that would help the deck a little bit, just because obviously when it enters, you search for an elemental, put it on top of your library. It's just pretty good. I think Flamekin Harbinger would be a huge boost for this deck as a whole. And obviously I'm not going to put Solitude, because that would be crazy, which I know that's part of the reason why Elementals is really good in Pioneer, is because of like Endurance and Solitude and Subtlety, which obviously none of those need to be in the Pioneer format. But I don't know. I think Elementals is really, really close, much closer than people actually realize, to being good in the Pioneer format. Okay, so number 2, I have Dimir Ninjas. So with Dimir Ninjas, Kaito Bane of Nightmares single-handedly put this deck on the map. I mean, just having a +1 loyalty ability to get an emblem where ninjas you control get +1/+1 is just absolutely bonkers. So you're playing all these bad rogues and ninjas just because Kaito is just that good. So what does the deck need to become tier 1? It needs better ninjas. There's not that many good ninjas. We only have cards essentially from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty in terms of other ninjas, and that's it. it. That we really don't have anything else. We also need more ninja synergy spells. What I mean by that is like, it's a 2-mana counter spell that's like, you know, it's a quench, but if you have a ninja, you get to like surveil one, or it costs, you know, it's more of a counter, or a draw spell that's like 4 mana, but if you have a ninja, it's 2 less or something. That's what the deck really needs to pop off, I think. But there's a lot of good reprints, honestly, of ninjas that are not currently in Pioneer, and I think one of them is Changeling Outcast. This would be the perfect card for this deck. Can't block and can't be blocked, just means it's really easy to start ninjutsuing creatures into play. It itself obviously is a ninja, so it gets benefit from the actual anthem, which some of the creatures in the deck that you play to be able to ninjutsu your creatures and aren't even actual ninjas. Like, you play cards like Ornithopter, which that totally makes sense why you're actually playing that. But there's so many ninjas that are not in Pioneer that would make this deck just absolutely fantastic. I think ninjas is super close. The deck is already seeing play, and it's already 5-0ing leagues, and people are playing it at competitive events just because Kaido Bane of Nightmares is that good. So that's why I have Dimir Ninjas and number 2 on the list. And number 1, I think that this is a deck that no one's really thinking about, and no one really ever thinks about just in Pioneer in general, but other formats it does see a little bit of play. And that card is Synthesizer Affinity. Simulacrum Synthesizer is an absolutely busted card, and as soon as we start getting some better artifacts in the format, this card is really going to take off. Obviously, we've seen it be really good in formats like Timeless as well as Modern, because you play cards with along with Simulacrum Synthesizer, you play like Frogmite and Mur Enforcer, and then there's the Salamander that I'm forgetting all of a sudden. Sojourner's Companion, I think, is the name of it. And then you have cards like Thought Monitor, and it just absolutely pops off with Simulacrum Synthesizer. What does the deck need? It needs the affinity artifacts. And I'm not necessarily saying that they should print a whole bunch of those into the format. I'm not implying that per se. But what I am saying is this deck is so close to being good. If we get a card like even just basic Mur Enforcer, we don't even need any of the super duper crazy ones or even souped up ones. If we just get cards like Mur Enforcer, you know, and other cards like that, I think Simulacrum Synthesizer, you know, affinity, for lack of better terms, I think would be absolutely fantastic in the format. Watch out. I'm telling you, if you don't have your Simulacrum Synthesizers, buy them now. As Pioneer goes on, this card is only going to get better, or they're going to print more cards that work really, really well with this card. I'm telling you, pick your copies up. This deck will be good in the format at some point. Whether or not it's sooner or later, I couldn't tell you, but I'm telling you, it's really, really close. And that's why I have Synthesizer Affinity number 1 on the list. So that takes us to the end of the video here. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about my list? Is it completely wrong? Is there a deck that you think is really, really close to being good that I didn't mention here? Or do you think my list ordering is wrong? Just let me know what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe, though. Once again, we are so close to 1,000 subscribers, and you're not going to want to miss the giveaway once we get there. Huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph, Matt, Arcadius, Ray, Gary, Saranoki, and Night Red 3. If you're interested in being a channel member, it's only $1 a month, and you get access to the exclusive Commander Crane Discord, as well as other features here on the channel. So, I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one.